It's the How to Write Funny podcast. I'm Scott Dickers. Speaking today with Beth Newell, who is co-founder of the women's media parody website Reductress. Tell us about the origin of Reductress.
Okay. I'm just trying to think how far back to go here. I met Sarah Papalardo, my co-founder, at the Magnet Theater. We both did sketch there. I was teaching sketch there, and I had started running some free sketch workshops for women, trying to get more women into the program, because I was noticing that women were much more scared of writing, and obviously we wanted to be less of a boys' club. And so in teaching these workshops and classes, I had seen the same themes popping up over and over again, just sort of like making fun of women's media. And when you had a room full of women, everyone would laugh hysterically at this, whereas when you propose these ideas in a room full of men on your sketch team, it would kind of be like a lot of blank stares. And so having a room full of women was this really empowering experience of just realizing like, oh yeah, this stuff is really funny. It's really funny to at least 50% of the population. And we've been sort of suppressing these ideas in other areas where they're not getting the same reception. So that was a big part of the inspiration. I also, was trying to write more, trying to find ways to, write in a way that people would actually see what I was writing. I had written a show with a friend of mine, Julia Hines, called Dumb Blogs and Internet Victims, and had just been sort of obsessed with the sort of internet culture, Facebook, Tumblr world as it related to women's media. So all this stuff was sort of stewing in my mind when late one night I suddenly had the idea for a website that would sort of satirize women's magazines and women's media. And it was one of those things where I was like, I need to jump on this idea now or it's never going to happen. So I was like, who can I email to make this a real thing? I just emailed Sarah like immediately and was like, do you want to make this website with me? I know it's really hard. This is going to be a lot of work, but it seems worth doing if you're interested. We just have to go like 100% into this. And she agreed like right away. And I was like, okay, I guess we're doing this.
And were you too close before that at the Magnet Theater?
I wouldn't say close. I would say we would be the two women in a room full of guys working on a show where there was that sort of camaraderie. I was also at a time in my life where I was trying to transition from, making no money doing comedy to like actually making a career out of it. And so I was at this really like anal hyper place where when I would get in a room with people to do it, I was like, why aren't they taking this as serious as me? I'm trying to really go for this. And I feel like Sarah was one of the few people that would, do the things she said she was going to do, show up with writing as she said she was going to do it, edit videos, just like actually make things happen. And
you got a sense she was a doer.
Yes, exactly. And not that other people weren't doing that, but I was really desperate for someone to take it as seriously as I was at that point.
And had you seen anything like this before, another website or a blog or anything that kind of made fun of women's media in that way?
No, I know there's definitely sketch stuff floating around that was starting to skewer women's media. I hadn't seen a website like this. I think that was a big part of it for us because we were like, has anyone done this before? I don't think they have. And if they haven't, this seems like something that should be done before someone else does it.
It's really shocking that hasn't been done.
Yeah, it was surprising to us. I mean, I think we've since seen a couple of somewhat similar things put out there, but nothing that really like took women's media in such an encompassing way and sort of went for it consistently. And I mean, I had interned at The Onion, and so I had kind of seen how they operated. And so I wanted to take a little bit of inspiration from that in doing this, but I also wanted to make sure we were doing something very different from The Onion. Because I know there's definitely those Onion copycat sites out there, and people kind of hate them.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, and I didn't want to get labeled as a copy of anything right out of the gate. And I figured, obviously they do that really well already, so we wanted to do our own thing in our own way.
Good thinking. So I did not know you were an intern for The Onion. I'm just finding that out today. which is, there's so much to be learned there, obviously, about how to manage and run a comedy organization that does print, or web comedy. So what are some of the things that you learned interning there?
I learned so much from interning there. I think we've taken a lot of our process from my internship there, but I interned under the web video department, the Onion News Network, and as a writing intern, I would get to sit in all the meetings where they went through people's ideas, which is just really invaluable. And it was really interesting just to see how picky they were about choosing an idea, how they would tweak people's pitches into what they thought was a better headline. And we definitely have used that process here. We have our writers pitch us weekly, and we'll sort of change the headlines to suit what we think is a better fit. I learned so much from watching those guys. Carol Kolb was running things when I was there, or at least she was running the staff writers and the meetings. And I feel like she was just such like a gracious leader, and that was really inspiring. I mean, it's always inspiring to see a woman, head up any sort of comedy thing. But
yeah, she's great. She was one of the first, the second writer we hired who was a woman, but the first to ever become an editor.
Yeah, I mean, she was just really talented, but also just so nice. And I feel like, it's always good to see someone who like knows how to get things done and lead a room, but also isn't afraid to be the butt of the joke or, take one for the team.
Yeah, the egoless leader is like a hard thing to find.
Exactly. Yeah, so she was like a great role model at the time for me.
Anything else you can articulate that you learned there?
I think I learned also just that it's a lot of hard work to actually make comedy happen. I felt like the staff writers were always staying really late, working really hard, and there's not nearly as much glory in it as you kind of imagine when you're younger.
Not a lot of glamour.
Yeah, exactly. And I've definitely seen that in running our site too. It's just as fun as it is in certain points when you get in a room together and bat around ideas, you then have to go back to your desk for hours and hours and just write and rewrite. And sometimes, you're debating an idea for a while and it's just not working. There's just a lot of little things, a lot of daily grind. And in that internship, and also my internship at UCB, you would see that, there's just like a lot of little tasks that need to get done that aren't not glamorous or fun, but you're still contributing to the end product,
Yeah, when was the UCB internship? Was that before or after The Onion?
Yeah, that was earlier than The Onion. I interned at The Onion when I was just out of college in 2009, or I guess I was a year or so out of college, and I interned at UCB while I was still in college.
And what'd you do for them?
I was just a theater intern, which is, again, not a glamorous job at all. It's just a lot of like mopping and crowd control and, ticket sales. And it's like really not fun tasks, but a really fun environment to do those tasks in. And you would get to see shows for free and get to be around funny people and hang out. And it was great.
So you said before you were inspired by kind of the atmosphere in social media, the online world of like women's magazines or women's news. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of describe that world for us and what it was about it that bothered you, that you felt needed satirizing?
I think one of the big things that Sarah and I noticed is just like the repetitiveness of women's media and the tone of making the reader feel inadequate or insecure, and that articles are still being written in a way that they would be written in like our mother's day. So like it feels like there's not a huge leap from women's magazine articles of even the 1950s to now. Like it's a little bit, flashier and fashiony or whatever, but there's still, the tone is like, how do you get this guy to like you, or like, how do you stop looking like crap, So
even like the younger tilted magazines, they're doing that too?
In different ways. I think something that Sarah and I found very interesting is that in the last couple of years, this there's this tone of trying to empower women and, you know, make your, you know, inspire yourself and use these mantras, and it's seeped over into a lot of inspiring advertising. And on the surface, it looks great. You're like, oh, wow, these advertisers really care about us, and women are being empowered and strong, but it's still being used to sell us makeup or soap or whatever.
You're being empowered to get a man to like you or to not look
exactly,
like crap. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's some of the media that seems more progressive is almost actually more harmful, I think, because it's sort of putting out the same message underneath.
Yeah, and sort of co-opted more positive aspects of like feminism to nefarious ends.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so it's this great like subterfuge that's like almost like guerrilla marketing that's infused all of the women's magazines. That was your target. That was like, oh my God, that's so creepy.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, there's aspects of that we enjoy. You know, we're not immune from the interests of women, but it's interesting, like, even when the tone changes to be more empowering and say, like, instead of saying, like, wear this mascara so guys will like you, it'll say, like, oh, you look fierce in this mascara, like, and it's sort of like the language feels empowering. It feels like it's for you. But then at the same time, we're still getting this messaging as women that the only thing that really matters is our appearance.
Is that hard to parody, to really nail that and get that across?
Yeah. I mean, I think when the website started, we took a more heavy-handed approach or broad approach to sort of like hitting those targets because we wanted people to understand what the website was about. And these days, that it feels a little clunky to do that with what the site has become. So we have to take more specific targets or target more specific stories or events. And I think a lot of people have said it at this point too. Like a lot of other comedians have taken aim at this sort of world of women's media. So yeah, it can be hard. It can be hard to find new ways of saying the same things when those things are still out there over and over again.
Yeah, but I mean, the site's really working because there is this subtext that you get from looking at it, that the intelligence behind these ideas clearly understands how vapid that media is. And that's what's being made fun of, like, pretty consistently throughout. So whatever you're doing, it's working.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the cool things we've learned is that so many of our writers were immediately on board for these themes and understood the media in a fairly sophisticated way, where it's easy growing up with all this media around you to sort of conflate the ideas the media puts forth to you as understanding them as an idea of what women are actually like. And I think it's a lot easier to believe that if you're a man when you're kind of like looking at it from the outside. So it's nice when you talk about these things with other women and realize that most women are on the same page with you, that they don't want to be these things that are presented to us in the magazines.
Yeah. So let's take us back before UCB, before The Onion. You clearly had ambitions to get into comedy because that's where you're spending all the time that you're talking about today. So where did that come from? Like how young did you know that you wanted to do comedy?
I didn't. It took me a long time to realize it, or at least admit it to myself. I was always really into comedy growing up. I watched a ton of, Comedy Central and other things. BBC America was getting big when I was in high school, so I'd watch a lot of British comedy shows. My family, I think, is pretty funny. My dad was always making jokes, and we would always make fun of each other. Like, that was very acceptable at the kitchen table. And so I think because of that, I didn't ever see my interest in comedy as being unusual or exceptional. I just kind of assumed that everyone was into comedy in that way. I got to college here in New York. I was studying illustration, and starting my sophomore year, I started taking improv classes at UCB.
In what college?
Pratt Institute.
Okay. Design, illustration, advertising, that's kind of what they do, right?
Yeah.
Fashion.
I mean, they have different departments, so they do fine arts and industrial design, but I was in the communications design program studying illustration, so that was my focus.
And then where did you grow up?
I grew up in Massachusetts.
Okay. Well-to-do?
Middle class. I think we were like on the lower end of an upper middle class town, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So. But not necessarily any family strife, really. You guys are just laughing and having some fun growing up.
Yeah, growing up. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Things turned sour later?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to pin it on anyone. I don't think our family is still very much a loving, getting along family for the most part. But when I was in my sophomore year in college, it's weird to discuss the timing of this, but in December I signed up for my UCB class, my first improv class, which I was very nervous about, which was to start in January. And when I went home for Christmas vacation, my brother passed away before he ever made it home for the holidays. So that was a big turning point, obviously.
Sure. And is he older or younger?
He's 2 years older than me.
How did he die?
I could still debate exactly what happened, but he was on some prescription medications, which I think either interacted with each other weirdly or he was abusing them in some way. I was 19 at the time. He was 21.
That's awful.
It's just a freak sort of thing.
Do you have other siblings?
I have a younger sister. Yeah.
Wow. So you've got this huge life tragedy and you're going into comedy.
Yeah.
How does that square with you?
It's really interesting for me, again, because I was never a performer growing up and was terrified of the idea of taking an improv class.
Had you written?
No, not really. I mean, I would do bits with my friends, but we didn't really know. I would not have classified them as comedy. We would write on Post-it notes and post things on the vending machines at school. Little things like that.
Sure.
But yeah, I think my brother dying was just very weirdly transformative because I was so terrified of pursuing any sort of performance thing. And then when you have something like that happen to you, it's weirdly freeing and exhilarating in a way, especially when you're young, because you're you start not caring about the world as much around you. You're sort of don't care what people think about you as much, and are just sort of understanding the shortness of life at that point. So I think that enabled me to actually do an improv and enjoy it in a way that I maybe wouldn't have if it hadn't happened. Because even in light of that happening, I would go to my level 1 classes just sort of incredibly nervous, shaking, from the nervousness of it. And just was, I think if that hadn't happened, and this still has happened to me, I would sort of get up on stage and not say anything, not put myself out there. And because of that experience, it was a little more freeing to just be well, this doesn't matter nearly as much as I think it does. And I might as well give it a shot while I'm here and blow off some steam and.
That's great. So you've got this new sort of nothing to lose attitude.
Yeah. I think that attitude, you could debate this, but I think that attitude lasts for maybe a year out from a tragedy, and then it sort of starts to fade and you come back to reality.
You start getting scared of everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Who was your teacher for that first improv class?
My first class was Jackie Clark.
Okay. Good teacher?
Yeah, she was great. I think I really empathize with her because she's also a Massachusetts person, has that masshole vibe. It was very warming for me.
And did you, I usually only hear about massholes from the Boston area, but were you guys near the Boston area? Or?
Yeah, we were maybe 20, 30 minutes outside of the city. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So you rose through the classes at UCB? You kept taking improv?
Yeah, I took improv throughout college and would see shows and perform. I was on a couple indie teams. I eventually did some performing at UCB. And by the time I graduated school, I think I was spending more time at UCB than I was at school. So that was kind of where all my friends were. That was my whole life at that point.
Was there any moment during that time where the switch went off and it was oh yeah, comedy? Or was this just a really gradual process?
It was really slow. I think I was even coming out of that, I was very much in denial about how much I wanted to pursue comedy. Like, for people getting into it at a young age, I think it's hard to negotiate like parental expectations with pursuing comedy, especially when you don't really have models in your life of people who've pursued that as a career. I think also being in school for illustration, it was kind of enough of a leap for me to tell my parents I was going to go into art for a living. And I think even that, they were like, okay, well, you better figure out a way to get paid for it, you know? And then I had this whole other thing going on at night doing improv that they were like, so what are you trying to get on SNL? What's the deal? And it was so hard to explain to them, like, no, I'm doing this unpaid art form that doesn't translate to television, really. Like, I would have to gain another skill. So I was super in denial about the fact that that I really wanted to do comedy. It took me a long time to come to that. And I think, like, the only thing that kept me coming back to it was just, like, that feeling of, like, this is what makes me happy. And I left school. I tried to be an illustrator, was very bad at the business end of it. And, it's one of those fields where there's no clear career path. You have to put yourself out there. And
most people freelance, right?
Yeah. I think I was really terrified of the idea of working in an office. So I was like, I'm just going to be a freelancer. I'll figure it out, which is not a good strategy unless you are really gung-ho about networking and, finding those jobs. So I was failing miserably at that for a couple of years. I had that internship at The Onion. That was great.
What kind of drawing did you do, by the way? What kind of illustrations?
I was a little bit all over the place. I had taken a couple of children's book illustration classes, so I was kind of interested in doing that. I was doing sort of like political cartoons sometimes. Other times I was painting.
Is this all in Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff?
No, that was the other thing.
Analog?
I was very analog. I think I kind of steered clear of computer stuff because, again, I didn't want to end up in an office. And I think I knew if I learned too many computer skills or design skills, I would very much end up being a graphic designer sitting in an office pushing pixels around all day, right. Which I didn't want to do. And I have some of those skills, but I just never went as far with them as I should have to actually be employable.
Right.
Yeah, so I avoided that. So then I left my internship at The Onion, was contributing to them for a little while, then was sort of floating and was just in that weird early 20s depression state of like, what am I doing with my life?
And how are you paying the bills at this point?
I had different odd jobs. I worked at the Apple store for a while.
Did you go through their training?
What's that?
Did you go through their training?
Yeah.
That's pretty valuable, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some value there.
Applicable to other work, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think I'm supposed to say anything about working there because they have a very ironclad agreement, but there's definitely skills that you learn in customer service and learning how to use computers and how to explain computers to people, I think.
Yeah, no, they're really just really unlike any other customer service world, the way they train people and the way they do things. It really is innovative and interesting, and it's too bad people don't talk about it because it'd be fun to know. Like, I guess I'd have to go through the training to figure out how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk to you about it later, but yeah, I think I'm still scared about talking about it. They very much impressed upon us that we should not ever talk about anything that
is so interesting.
I'm probably breaking that rule by even saying that.
No, you haven't said anything about it, and we'll cut all this out anyway.
Okay. So I worked there. I worked at a school for a while, actually in the nurse's office. I sort of was like an assistant, and I worked after school watching kids. And then I babysat for a long time after that. But I finally had sort of a breakthrough moment where I was like, first of all, I needed to get it together in my life because I hate all my jobs. Second of all, I need to admit to myself that I want to write and actually start writing. So I kind of had that realizing I was getting older and needed to take this seriously. And started writing a lot. Went back to taking sketch writing classes at the Magnet Theater in New York.
Now, why did you opt for the Magnet for sketch writing?
This is going to sound rude or weird, but my husband was the artistic director at the Magnet Theater. And because he worked there, I could do design stuff for them in exchange for free classes. And working all these odd jobs and not having a large income, I didn't have a lot of money to spend on comedy classes at that point.
So did you, I hear what you're saying, that it could be implied that you thought it would be better to go somewhere else if you could afford it, but you went to the Magnet?
Yeah, I mean...
But is that really true now, do you think? Or do you think their sketch writing classes are every bit as good as the UCBs or the Pitt or wherever they do that?
I think their sketch writing classes are good. I think all the classes, or most of the classes everywhere, have some value. And I had already taken, sketch writing at UCB. So to sort of like get back in the game, I just needed something to keep me focused on writing, and yeah, they have, I'm very partial to them these days because I ended up working there and teaching sketch writing. And I then became the sketch director and helped them build their sketch team system at the theater. So
do you find that what you've learned, not only through the classes but also through teaching sketch writing, that so much of that applies to internet article writing, just the basic beats of escalating a joke and stuff?
Yeah, I think game is really important. And with what we do, the game naturally flows from the headline. So it sort of ties in very easily to the things I observed interning at the Onion, which is sort of the headline is sort of all important. People aren't going to click on it unless they understand what the joke is right away. And we sort of keep that title as sort of sacred.
Yeah, that's your mooring mast, basically. So every joke kind of flows from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's the process like for putting together material for the Reductress? Is it the Reductress or Reductress?
Oh, it's just Reductress,
okay.
But we get the all the time.
Yeah, no, it's that cursed that afflicts so many publications. So what's your process? How often do you do new material, and how do you deal with writers? Because you're in New York City, so it's not like you can afford a huge loft office space. You guys worked out of your homes for a while there at first.
Yeah, for a long time. I think we worked from home for about a year or so. Then we were at a different co-working space, which is sort of like for artists. It was like a really rundown Lower East Side co-working space where there'd be like glitter all over the tables and stuff. And then we moved here to our current co-working space only maybe about a year ago or so, I think.
Do you bring people in? Is it all done through email or?
Most of our writers work remotely. We have a staff of 2 part-time editors in addition to me and Sarah, who work full-time on the site. And so we're all in here on Mondays, going through the pitches, deciding what pieces we want to assign to our writers. And then all of our writers sort of write remotely and just email us their pieces.
So they initially pitch headline ideas, and that's what you go over on Mondays?
Yeah.
And so you and Sarah and maybe a couple of these other editors are the other editors remote as well? Those 2 other editors?
No, they come in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the 4 of you sitting around going through the headlines and picking the ones that work.
Yeah.
Then you assign those. Do you assign the headlines to the same people who wrote them, or do you mix it up?
We do assign them generally. There's maybe been 1 or 2 exceptions ever, but unfortunately, we can't pay our writers at this time, so the only sort of motivation we have for them is their credit on the site. So yeah, we would always have people write up the articles that they had pitched us, and then we kind of go in and edit and rewrite everything to keep it in the tone of the site, to keep it consistent, and just punch things up and try to keep the quality level high. So.
That was a problem we had at the Onion early on, was you always had to rewrite everything that people wrote to make sure that the voice was consistent.
Yeah.
And the editor's job at the Onion was always really hard. And then over the years, we sort of figured out a way to train the writers to do the voice better so that drafts would come in better shape. Are you guys doing anything to that end where you're kind of getting people to get with the program in terms of the voice and the tone?
I think our editors have a sense of that, and are gaining a sense of it all the time. We occasionally will send people notes on pieces to try to like help them understand why we're editing in a certain direction. Unfortunately, with the turnaround and the amount of time we have, we just don't often have time for that, which I assume is kind of a little bit frustrating for the writers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a horrible position to be in because somebody creates something and they're trying to be funny, and then you're looking at it and saying, well, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's just, how do you deal with like communicating to a writer, what you did isn't working, we're going to change it? Are there ways that you have to deal with the emotions and the politics involved in that? Or is it really just a treadmill and you just have to change it and move ahead and let them suck it up?
I mean, it's a little bit of a treadmill where we do kind of have to just keep moving forward. If people have issues with the changes, we do try to be communicative with them. And I think it's something we discuss while we're editing sometimes, is why are we making these changes? And we have like a little bit of a shorthand for common themes in why we make certain changes. More recently, we've gotten better at just sending things back for rewrites if they're in really rough shape.
Give the writer another chance.
Yeah, give them a chance to put more of their own stuff into it, which is good. But yeah, I think that's one thing that I learned from doing sketch and being at the Onion, is just learning how to articulate the issue as something, because it's easy to just be like, this isn't funny, I'm making it funny. It's a lot harder to explain why it's not working, or what you do want it to be. So I think we've learned a little bit how to do that, but still we just don't always have time to explain it to people. So I know I'm sure there's instances where people are a little bit frustrated by the process, but it's sort of just what we got to do to keep moving.
And how much new material do you produce?
That's a good question. Sarah is always better at answering these questions than me, but I think we put out maybe 50 or so pieces a week.
Wow.
Maybe more than that.
That's a huge amount of work. So you guys are full-time, you and Sarah both, on this?
Yeah.
And your editors, your two editors, also full-time?
Yeah. Well, sorry, our other two editors are part-time.
Okay. And how many writers do you have?
That's, again, hard to say. We have people come in and out. So at any given time, I would estimate around 40 people are contributing.
Well, that helps.
Yeah.
That's a good amount.
Yeah.
It's a lot of headlines to go through, though, isn't it?
It is a lot to go through. But I think that's part of the process for us, and something that I really appreciated from the Onion is sort of the percent of pitches that were accepted was pretty low. It's like 10% or something like that.
Yeah, just the whole idea of volume being the key.
Yeah. So, and I think it's a really good process to learn too, is just forcing yourself to write. So our writers turn in, 10 or 15 pitches a week. We maybe take one or two of those. And it's just a good exercise, I think, to get your brain working.
And how do those writers get to you? Do they submit blindly at first, or do you recruit people? Did you know people from your sketch days, or generally, how do you find them?
So when we launched the site, Sarah and I tried to accumulate articles for a few months before we launched. We started in January 2013. We launched the site in April. So in between then, we were sort of recruiting all of our sketch writing friends or funny women friends to write for us, trying to explain what the site was. And we also just wrote a ton of articles ourselves. So I think the two of us probably wrote the majority of those articles, just kept rewriting them. And then we launched the site with, I want to say 30 or so articles, 30 to 50. Since then, a lot of people come to us. They, just email us through the site and get in touch, and we're more than happy to let people pitch to us. Occasionally we'll recruit from different improv theaters, or just like send out an email blast letting people know that we're open to new writers. So yeah, it's a combination of those things.
And then how did you handle the webmastership? Did either of you know how to do a website, or did you just go to one of those sites that kind of do it for you, or did you get a person?
The thing that I really lucked into is that Sarah was a project manager at a company that made websites and other things.
Awesome.
So she ended up figuring out how to code most of the original website herself. And she had some help from, colleagues of hers helping her with the development. So we put the site up through WordPress, sort of like built a homepage to sort of make it look more like a magazine. And then a year in, we did a Kickstarter to redesign the site. Again, Sarah is much better than me at understanding all these things. So she, was able to hire a developer and a designer and make all those little things work together.
Cool. And the Kickstarter money helped with that?
Yeah.
And the Kickstarter campaign was a success? You got what you needed?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it was like a little bit bare bones in terms of Kickstarters. We were just sort of paying the developer and the designer and stuff.
Right.
But
any other capital infusions, or was it just the Kickstarter? Did you guys have savings or family money that helped you start up?
it was just the Kickstarter. I mean, we put a little bit of our own money in at the beginning just to pay for hosting and a couple different things. We had to pay to form an LLC for the web.
Yeah, there's
for the
fees
business.
and stuff.
Yeah, so that was a decent chunk of money given my level of income at the time. But other than that, we've sort of just been bootstrapping the whole thing. So.
And now is it bringing money in?
It is. It mostly at this point is paying for, the website and this office and our part-time editors. So Sarah and I are not making money off the site. Everything's kind of going back into the company. But, we'll occasionally get some outside projects where we can get some income from. So. Yeah.
So how are you guys paying the rent then?
At home, you mean?
Yeah.
Through those side projects that we're getting, which hopefully we'll be picking up more of. I don't mean to be super vague, but there's nothing we can really talk about at this point.
But they're ancillary projects that are related to Reductress.
Yeah, they're related to the brand.
What other ways do you guys plan to expand or kind of advance your comedy careers? Are you going to stay with the Reductress? Is this like a stepping stone to get a TV writing job? Or how are you guys thinking of that?
There was a time where I thought this was just a stepping stone to like other projects and just getting my name out there. But it's become so involved and it's become so much its own thing that right now this is what I'm focused on. We kind of joke, it's kind of half jokingly, half serious, say that we want to be like the Oprah of women's satire, where we sort of have our own TV show and book club and network. We just want to keep expanding. And I think there's a lot of ways that we can take this brand and this style to other avenues.
Yeah, because that whole condescending voice of mainstream women's media is probably not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think so. And there's so many different ways that gets put out there in the media. So. Yeah,
you're both based in New York, so you have a much quicker route to those sorts of things. Like you meet people at sketch shows and like there are agents who show up at these things and people in TV are kind of milling around in that community and stuff. So I can totally see why and how you would start to have some ancillary projects coming together, which is so great. What did you guys know about like running a business before you started doing this? Like, did you either of you have any sort of entrepreneurial background or training or even desire?
No, it's funny, I say this all the time, but there's so much about what we do that I never would have envisioned myself doing, just especially on the business side, but just in terms of organization, like just to get everything done that we need to get done, we have so many like spreadsheets and things going on that I never would have imagined myself working on in the past. When we started out, I think we knew fairly soon that we wanted to start an LLC, but I think part of it was just legal protection in case someone decided to sue the site. We needed that, and we got like a cease and desist letter very quickly upon launching the site.
Really? From whom?
From L'Oreal. So we had some article about L'Oreal creates line of anti-bullying makeup for teens, and they were like, take this down.
Did you take it down?
No. So this was like, I think in the phase, we had started filing our LLC, but we didn't have the paperwork yet to say that we were an LLC. So we were very much vulnerable to any sort of lawsuit, even though they didn't have any legal basis for it. We just didn't have the money to go to court. So I think we just changed the title to Boreal instead of L'Oreal.
Have you since changed it back?
No, we haven't. We probably should, but I don't know.
Was that the first of many, or was that really your only brush with?
That was the only real one we have had. I don't think we've had anything else. Yeah, but just in terms of business stuff, we figured that out. I'm not into business stuff or forms or taxes. I'm really bad at all that stuff. So a lot of it I kind of defer to Sarah on, which she's better at. But I definitely have been forced to think about those things a lot more than I would have imagined, and just read up on business and funding and all those fun things.
It's great. It sounds like you two have very complementary skills, which seems to work out well.
Yeah, it was definitely a happy accident, I think, because there's a lot of skills Sarah had that I didn't even realize asking her to participate in this, that have really worked out well for me.
Yeah, like the website stuff and the business money stuff. It seems like she kind of filled every other category that you didn't.
Exactly. Yeah, like I can only imagine how much time I would have had bogged down if I had tried to figure out the developing stuff. Because, I mean, every few weeks there's some sort of site glitch that she has to go manage and get someone to fix, and I wouldn't even know where to begin on that.
So things are going well for Reductress. You guys are getting more seen and getting more known. What are some of the things that have happened that have really boosted your readership or really made you guys feel like, oh, wow, this is really working and we're getting successful?
Well, as soon as we launched, within a week or so, I think we got some attention in the press. I think the big one was for the Daily Dot, which is a website.
Did you guys do any kind of promotion or...
Yeah, we tried to. I had, compiled the list of emails back from my UCB days, just trying to get the word out to every comedy person I'd known. A friend of ours had done a little bit of brief PR for a show, so she gave us her list of contacts, and we tried to email all these press people. And I think word of mouth has really helped. But also one thing I found is that when we try to do those things, a lot of times the attention we do get comes from someone totally unrelated to our efforts. So, you could spend all this time promoting and get no bites, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, someone contacts you. So I think it's useful, but it doesn't always work the way you would expect it to.
Right. What else happened? Did you guys... You said you got covered on that one website. Was there any New York press or anything else happening?
Yeah, we've slowly gotten a lot of little press. I'm trying to think. Much later, I think we had Elle Magazine covered us.
And they're sort of a target, aren't they?
I guess so.
I mean, they're ads, I guess.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Yeah,
So that's good.
Yeah, we had the Daily Beast much more recently has interviewed us. I'm sure I'm missing something important. We had a feature in Newsweek, which was really big.
That's huge. Yeah.
I mean, it felt important to be able to show our parents a print magazine that was actually talking about us. What else? We had... I don't know. I have a list of all these things somewhere that I'm forgetting. And
then is there going to be advertising on the site at some point? Is that how you guys are going to be paying the bills, or is there now?
We do have ads now.
I haven't noticed them, so you guys are doing a good job of hiding them.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, we try to keep it looking good. We have ads up. Again, like I said, a lot of that revenue sort of just goes back into the website right now, so it pays for hosting and keeping the lights on and web developers and stuff like that. Yeah, I think, we're working on these side projects, and hopefully that'll bring in more revenue. And I think our long-term goal for a very long time has been to add more video to the site. And we are still trying to figure out the best way of doing that. Because as much as we like making video, it just is so time-consuming. Or it either eats up a ton of money or a ton of time. So you have to pick one. And right now, we don't have either to spare.
Right.
So we're figuring that out.
Yeah, no, that's a real catch. But you obviously know a lot of people in that world. And I'm sure you'll figure out a way to put something together. So we'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me, Beth. It's
Thank
been a
you.
lot of fun.
Thanks.
If you enjoy the How to Write Funny podcast, please take a couple of minutes to leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen. Reviews help spread the word and keep the podcast going.